restore and how we're starting to gain permission and more. And this year I wanted to update you and actually bring to reality certain things that we learned by ourselves, and as to what we found as amateur conservationists, our interest in biodiversity, and when we talk biodiversity, what in the real sense does it mean, and how much of I'm not going to tell you the negative stories of what's happening, lives are being killed, animals of all forms are dying, but then the fascinating thing about nature, how nature bounces back even when she gets the tiniest of the tiniest opportunities. I'm going to tell you two stories, and I'm going to just take 20 minutes time because that's how much I've come prepared for, so that we could inspire all of you to volunteer with us for the lakes in future. We took up two lakes. One is the Arasan Kadani Lake and the other is the Keelkattale Lake. Both lakes are in Chennai, not very far from here. The Arasan Kadani Lake, to be precise, is behind Chemmanjeri. Satyabama College, Pinnadi, Chemmanjeri, the entire complex is behind that. The Keelkattale Lake is on the Pallavaram Thanipakam Radial Road, just before the beach and garden signal. So, what we at Environmentalist Foundation India wanted to do was, out of this lake, restore it for biodiversification, not for people recreation. So when I mean restoration, we didn't want to build fancy walls around it, and we didn't want to put slides and merry-go-rounds, but we were looking at restoring the lake for biodiversification in terms of flora and fauna. So the journey began like we wanted to organize a few lake cleanups, and many of you did volunteer with us for that, where we actually got down into the lake to remove physical garbage. We didn't know where to start, but we had to start somewhere, and we also had to show the government that we care, and we just didn't want the permission so that we could restore the lake and claim credit for it. But we wanted to show them that we genuinely wanted to do the scientific restoration of this lake. So we got down, we started cleaning these lakes of all physical garbage, which included removal of non-degradable elements of any sort which doesn't belong to a lake ecosystem, which includes polythene, plastic, rubber, thermocol, and the kind of waste that we actually usually find in these lakes are astonishing, ranging from domestic waste to industrial waste, definitely the industrial waste, plastic shred to a lot of hair. A lot of these barbers just come dump the hair there, and poultry waste, chicken skin, and a lot more other non-degradable yet harmful materials which are found on the lake bunch and right into the water. When we started removing this, we actually accumulated in tons. The garbage that we were collecting, we were getting accumulated in tons, to the extent that there are lakes which we've been cleaning for the last 2 years and we still haven't even reached 50%. The example is one, the Madambakam Lake, the second is the Tirukachur Lake near Maraimalai, just opposite Fort Plant. So these are lakes which we've been cleaning almost once a month. On every Sunday we adopt a patch and we start cleaning. So what difference did the cleanup make? The difference that the cleanup made was we started seeing, when the ground got cleared of physical garbage which was hindrance to life forms thriving upon it, we really did see smaller to tinier species in terms of insect population return in quite a number. Then we were fascinated if these were the insects that belong to this pond or lake, or are they new ones which are randomly sprouted out of nowhere, or are they effects of pollution that only these insects have come, and what happened to the original species that used to survive here. So these kind of questions started arising in our mind. That is when we got into the entire topic of species identification, species recovery, and reintroducing that species back into that lake ecosystem. So let me make more sense here. Fish, frog, snake, a lot of insects and more. Then pollution happened, garbage was dumped, all these life forms vanished one after the other. Then now what we are looking at is we are actually doing right now. And to our fascination again, when we started doing this is when we understood there's something called restoration science. The field of restoration science is comparatively new. It's only 27 years old in the branch of science. So it's amazing to even sit and read about restoration science, because it talks about so many different levels of species variegation and more. And this is science which can never be taught in class. If I'm going to go tell a student there's something called a species, they have to be at the lake. Let me give you an example which is close to us. The olive ridley sea turtles. Yeah, the olive ridley sea turtle is a key indicator species. What do I mean by that? This turtle swims thousands of kilometers across. So she starts at Chennai and swims. Research has proven that this turtle could reach, the Chennai turtle could reach boundaries anywhere reaching up to West Bengal, closer to the Bangladeshi waters, and even off limits of Andaman coast, and returns to the same beach plus or minus 2 kilometers where she was born to lay her eggs. When she's swimming this vast distance, and if she returns safe, that means the ocean is still a good place for turtles to exist. It makes sense. See, you and I are traveling around the country, we find enough food to eat, and we have comfortable place to stay, and we come back home in the good shape, in the good fit that we left our city. That's the same logic here also. The turtle leaves Chennai, she's swimming all over the place, she has enough food to eat in the ocean, she has good place to stay in the ocean, then she comes back to the same beach. If the population drops, then there is something wrong about the ocean, because the turtle is the only species which connects land and the ocean. You don't see fish coming out like to the beach and staying there and going back in, but the olive ridley sea turtle is the only species which actually comes out and shows us, okay, see, the ocean is kind of okay, it's not all that bad, or it is very bad, but still I'm trying to put up a brave fight. So that is a key indicator species. Our lakes and ponds have key indicator species too. This includes a very simple bird. It's called the cattle egret. You all would have seen. It's a white bird. It usually sits on top of buffaloes, and that's exactly why it's called the cattle egret. So the cattle egret has multiple responsibilities in the ecology. And if my speech at any point looks like a sermon or an advice, please don't think so. We've actually learned all this, and I'm very proud in sharing all this. That's it. It's not to show off that, see, we know so much. Definitely not to motivate. So this cattle egret, what this bird indicates is, this bird indicates that the lake has enough feed for her. And when she indicates that there is enough feed for her, it also indicates the factor that she doesn't eat just one kind of food. She eats ranging from insects to smaller microbials to a lot more. So if she can survive in that lake, if she can still be in that lake, it also proves the fact that there are other life like water body. And if the cattle egret or birds like this are found there, it's also more reason for us to actually work quicker so that even that species doesn't vanish. We are being told that we used to have if you're looking at the Pallikarnai marsh, then connecting to the Perumbakam marsh, and then going into the smaller, tinier scrub jungles which are on the parallel sides of Oymar with Buckingham Canal on one end, running up to the Tiruporur forest and then to the Kedambakam forest, and then looking at the Tirusulam Malay, the entire hills which connects to the Perumbakam hills. So this used to actually be a paradise. So if you just shut your eyes, remove all these buildings, roads, nothing against buildings, roads, but just that we have to remove them for it to look like paradise now. So we remove all the buildings, roads, and then if you look at the geography that this city was, it had a coastline, it had a channel which was the Buckingham Channel, which is running right here, and then it had these hills which were connected, one side from Tirusulam, the Pallavaram hills, to Tambaram, the Nadivirapattu section, and then on the left side it forks into Perumbakam and more, and then you had a huge Pallikarnai marshland which had feeder lakes in the forms of the Pallavaram lake, the Keelkattale lake, the Narayanapuram lake, the Velacheri lake, the Arumbakam lake, and on the other side you had the entire Seven Sister Lakes. We talk about the Northeast Seven Sister States, but here we have Seven Sister Lakes. And these are things which we actually found out when we went out volunteering, and it's so fascinating and amazing that how we've forgotten them. And we're trying to revive those, simple as that. So the Seven Sister Lakes, we're talking about a Karane Lake, a Mambakam Lake, the Arasan Kadani Lake, and all these lakes which actually connect and pour into the Perumbakam Marsh, which then finally drains also parallelly into the Buckingham Canal, which actually feeds the larger channel and then the entire Tirupur Kedambakam forest. So we used to have something called as a jungle cat. We have been told that, and I'm sure many of you who have friends in the wildlife circle are also aware of the fact that somebody spotted a leopard. I can't vouch for it because we really don't know. So somebody spotted a leopard near the Tirupur forest and more. Or in terms of the kind of bird population, recently there was the entire bird marathon, and many of you would have participated in that too. So this is exactly what we're talking about. We are not just talking about a superficial conservation plan where we're talking about like let's have lush green plantation done, or let's actually go clean up a lake and more. We are going one step further. We are looking at how this lake can actually be home to several species, not just for you and me. And if you and I have a certain expectation out of the lake, the lake has certain expectation out of us on how we should behave with the lake. So whenever we go talk to people, residents, anybody about a lake restoration plan, the first thing they ask is, okay, once we clean, once we do the plantation and everything, this can become a jogger's track, this can become a walking park, this can become a place where my kids can play. So this can become a place where I can come, let go all my tension and I can relax. And that's the only angle we're looking at. We're requesting every single one of you to look beyond that. See, we already have a nice cozy bedroom, hall and everything to stay and live in. If we are not able to be content with that, it's our problem. We shouldn't go out, ruin a lake also. That's the whole angle that we're getting at. Because these are the tiny last few pockets left where these life forms can thrive. When many of us my age grew up, we actually did see frogs. But today, we actually can't see frogs. Where are the frogs? Even the lakes that we go clean, if we find a frog, we are very excited because the last 4 years that we've been doing cleanups in Chennai, we've seen these lakes change. We've definitely seen these lakes change. We never used to get skin allergies when we got into the water and cleaned these lakes, but today it's happening. We never used to actually have, we used to spot at least a dragonfly, we used to at least spot some kind of insects. There used to be really big red ants. Then when we started reading about these red ants, there is a Chennai indicator species in red ants. These are not tiny red ants, these are really big ones. And their bite is venomous. We have a poisonous ant in our city is something which we realize only after going to these lakes. Off lake we don't even find those ants. Our lakes have become so poisonous that we are capable of killing even the poisonous ants. So that's the range at which our lakes are getting ruined. And what we are again and again trying to indicate here is simple as this. These water bodies can no longer be just seen as tanks where you hold water and supply for metro water, or these water bodies can not just be seen as tanks where superficially you have grey water which still looks fine and you have some fancy boulevard avenue plantation and everybody walks around or drives by it. No, these water bodies have to be cleaned and restored in the real sense. So what do we have to do for that? For species identification, recovery, reintroduction. Simple as this. First, any kind of inlet into the lake needs to be regularized. So this is something which we all can demand for. And I've come up with very important information which many of you are tech savvy and all of you are there in social platforms. You can demand for this. There's something called the Chennai River Authority which has been set up. The Chennai River Authority is looking at 3 lakes to start with. The Pallavaram tank, the Keelkattalai tank and the Narayanpuram tank. And they're looking at restoring these 3 tanks and they have huge amounts of money but they're facing stiff public resistance because some landowners in the area are not very keen on this project. Their plan is to develop these lakes into a kind of a public recreation spot. Nobody's against all that, we're just trying to tell them, see, listen, let's look at biodiversification for land. So there is scope for people participation with the government to get these lakes restored. The second thing that's happening is the Perumbakam Marsh. I'm sure many of you have seen the petition, many of you have read about it already. Dinamala did carry a huge article on it. The Perumbakam Marsh, everybody's fancy hunky-dory glory about the Pallikarnai Marsh. See, the Pallikarnai Marsh is connected to the Perumbakam Marsh. The Perumbakam Marsh is almost 70% the size of the Pallikarnai Marsh. But what has been happening to the Perumbakam Marsh is equal to what's happening to the Pallikarnai Marsh. But none of us been informed about it. Did many of us even know that there's a Perumbakam Marsh? That's a larger question actually, genuinely speaking. At the Perumbakam Marsh, ranging from corporate companies to even government buildings, everybody is slowly, steadily encroaching. And they are building in the marsh. And under the Ramsar Convention and under the Endangered Society Act, these marshlands need to be protected. So we are going full throttle. We are going to the courts, we are asking, and again, this doesn't mean we are against development. See, a lake or a marsh is not where a road and a building belong. And we need to understand this. There was a very interesting debate which went on about why we need to protect the Pallikarnai Marsh. We really do need to protect the Pallikarnai Marsh for the simple one reason. The last 2 years, we have not had enough rains. We've not had enough rains and the water table has receded drastically. If there's anybody who here understands the scientific proof of how water table recedes, then you'll actually see, for example, if we have the bottle full of water, So when we have full monsoons, when we have enough rainfall or even excess rainfall, what happens is during summer the water level reduces to this point. Yeah, because we are on the coast, because you have the high pressure salinity, low pressure fresh water and everything. That is one major factor. And you know the only 3 seasons we have is hot, hot and hottest. So there's excess evaporation and the water level does reduce to almost 30% of the water table recedes irrespective of you and I having excess rainfall. So if that is the case, when you don't have rains for 2 years, just imagine what happens. But these marshlands are pockets where you can still hold water even when you don't have rains for 2 years. Drive down the Pallikarnai marsh or the Perupakam marsh, pockets which are left untouched, today still have water. So one of the lakes that we are trying to work on, all the lakes are dry. The Talangur lake is dry, the Arasan lake is like barren with raw water. So this is the case. So these marshlands are not just filter bodies, they are actually water holding bodies which can slowly but steadily drain and then inject our ground around with fresh water, which in turn has so many different dependent life forms. So this is the entire biology of this lake. So this lake, again and again, what I would love to stress is not just a water tank. It's science which is right in front of our eyes. And how these species adapt is the next larger question which we try to understand. And when we started going deeper into it, we're still in the process of it. Whatever information I have so far, I'm going to share with you. The adaptation of these life forms. There is a skin coloration difference in 2 of the frog species which we've identified. So I'm not randomly saying this on my own. We've sent this to the UNESCO. IHE is an organization based out of Delft in Netherlands. IHE Institute for Hydrological Engineering. So what they focus on is they focus on river restoration, ecological restoration and restoration science. So when we took photographs of these samples and we sent it to them, they actually we thought it was a new species of frog. They said no, it's not a new species, they won't recognize it as a new species. They asked us to start sending scale samples. When we sent scale samples is when we realized that the frog had a skin coloration which he or she was adapted. So these are amphibians which live in water and then go out, and we all know that. And you know what, when we go stand out in sun, we get sunburnt, so you have a sunblock and everything. These frogs, even their skin reacts to sun. And when their skin reacts to sun with the kind of chemical contamination or with the kind of pollutants in the water, their skin is actually getting eroded. So what the frog is doing is the frog is changing its diet. See, we all understand this. So you eat a lot of carrots, you become fair. So something like that, yeah. So the frog keeps eating something which keeps its skin moistened and not susceptible to sun on normal conditions. The frog then had to change its diet. Now we are looking at what is the frog eating so differently that the skin pattern is changing so that it doesn't react to those chemicals. For that we need to understand the kind of the kind of lakeweed or the kind of smaller tiny insects the frog is feeding on. What is the frog eating? So now the research has gone to that extent. So when you look at species identification, recovery, reproduction, you start at a frog and a frog that looks very different. Then you go deeper and deeper, you understand the frog is not different, the frog is adapting. Why is the frog adapting? The frog is adapting because the lake is changing. So how is the frog adapting? The frog is adapting by eating something different. What is the frog eating different? The frog is eating something different in forms of probably even becoming a vegetarian. We don't know. These are just random questions I'm throwing out. But we are doing extensive research. I can't put a date as to when, if you call me in 2 weeks and ask me, okay, what's the frog having for lunch? I won't be able to answer. But we are doing that research. We are trying to find how are we trying to do that. We're setting up small trap cameras, and we're also setting we're taking syringes into which we are also injecting kind of pigments. Yeah, we're injecting kind of pigments into certain pockets of the lake in the weeds, and we're also trying to identify insect population which we can repopulate with those pigments. And if the frog eats that, the frog is going to show that pigment coloration. So this is a proven research which I can actually share by email. This was done once in Jim Corbett to identify the invasive bug species. So we did that, and we're still waiting for results. The first one, it was very expensive. The first one we failed drastically. None of the pigments worked, none of the frogs survived. So the second batch we are trying now, we're trying to do something different. So this is the whole part of restoration science that I'm talking about. I want to use this platform again. I've told you this thing about how species is identified, recovered, reintroduced. Sustaining them is the next larger thing that we're looking at. We look at a frog species which can be brought back and reintroduced, but how are we going to protect it? The frog has to survive there. How are we going to do that? For that, we all have to pitch in. We all have to pitch in at different levels. We have to make sure that lake restoration or plastic issue or any environmental issue, one thing people find us very boring of it. Nobody wants to listen to any environmentalist because there's no real environmentalist. That's the truth. Anybody who understands the science of it, anybody who understands the core issue of it, who can actually go tell the real story and put the cause in front of him or her will definitely be accepted. And we are looking at people like that amongst every single one of you. There is these stories of fascination that we can share with our younger audience who really need to understand that this city is not just about the central station. Next time when they talk Chennai, they should actually show the picture of a olive-red sea turtle or that of a barn owl which actually flies every day between Besanagar beach and the Ashtalakshmi temple in the night. These are photos that we need to show about Chennai. And we have a beautiful ecology. If we can understand that ecology at a larger sense and start actually literally volunteering towards it, I think we'll actually be a model city in terms of protecting our environment. But in the true sense, it has to be done. For that, we require every single one of you. When I say we require every single one of you, we don't want your money, we don't want your donations, we don't want any kind of, the minute I say NGO, a lot of people come down with clothes on us. We don't want all that. I've come here to ask for genuine volunteers who think they have some kind of a manpower, woman power, which in terms of is communication, conservation, research, science, species knowledge or anything about Chennai, if you can come forward and just work with us. Every Saturday, Sunday we take new fresh volunteers and we go start working. Monday to Friday I know you're all working, so I can't expect you to join us. The Perumbakam marshland is something which we've taken up and we've given ourselves 2 years time. We've written to all the government, we've written to all the media. What we're trying to do is, we're trying to actually demarcate a boundary for the Perumbakam marsh. What is gone, let it go. It's political, we really can't do anything. How much ever you think of the power of one man can change everything, it's absolute bullshit. We really can't do it, I'm telling you. Because we tried doing it with the Kelkatte Lake and we almost got close to crash. And there's no result also, work has stopped. We are at least trying to ask the courts to instigate the PWT to draw boundaries to what is left of the Perumbakam marsh. And there are the 7 sister lakes which feed the Perumbakam marsh. If we can protect those 7 lakes in the given current form, and regularize inlets and start an extensive research on the different kinds of species which exist there as of today and which existed once upon a time, and how can we revive these 7 lakes and the entire marsh in the next 2 years. That's the whole target that we've given ourselves. So if you think you have the kind of manpower, woman power in terms of knowledge and cognition to come work with us in this, please do. Because we're not doing this as EFI, we're doing this as citizens of Chennai. So I'm sure you're also not CPC, you're also a citizen of Chennai. So on that note, I would like to leave it here. We have 2 websites. One is called indiaenvironment.org. Indiaenvironment.org is actually where we it's our professional page where we have project details. EFIvolunteer.com is where we put up every week's projects and we do stuff. I'm leaving this not halfway, I've finished what I wanted to say. I was given an hour's time, but I'm going to close it here because I don't have much to say. This is the story. The lakes, the ponds, the marsh in the city are not just water bodies, they are ecologically sensitive biodiversity hotspots, and we are trying to protect them as ecologically sensitive biodiversity hotspots. And we need ecologically sensitive individuals who understand the importance of this who can volunteer with us. Many of you have already volunteered with us in the past. I'm very, very grateful for that. And I want to use this platform to thank those who volunteered. And one thing is, please don't clap for us because I don't know if you're even planning to. If you were planning to, please don't, because we didn't come here for that. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's an absolute pleasure. Jai Hind.
Question answer session. Anybody has?
Hi, I'm Ravi. You told about regularizing, having checks on the inlets. right? So what kind of inlets are we talking about? For any inlet, right? From houses, from industries and all that. So one thing I came across recently that they are planning to construct a huge sump channel starting from SRP tools, connecting the NDSLA, everything, and directly into Pallikaranai. So is there an alternative to that? I mean, just out of curiosity.
So usually we follow the British model of drainage, where we actually, like, in the past, we have never distinguished between a stormwater drain and a sewage drain. So we've had them together. Now is when you must have seen under JNNURM scheme, they're actually separating into a stormwater and a sewage drain. So when that is happening, they're only allowed to let the stormwater drain into a marshland or a lake or a pond is what the JNNURM notification says. But what we have done in return is the stormwater drain has become the sewage drain. It's lost the purpose to which it's being built. The same is getting extended here also. And even when you go to Adyar or Kuvam, the mouths of the river, Adyar doesn't have, Kuvam has. The sewage treatment facility or the water treatment facility at different points along Nahru-Keni in Adyar River or at different points on Kuvam River, they have actually exceeded the limit, or they've actually exceeded their filtration levels. So this is what we're talking about. There are patterns of certain permissible limits of water only to be allowed into freshwater bodies, which a lake can also take. You just can't use it as like a septic tank where you keep dumping it. So this channel that we're talking about was actually designed only as a stormwater drain to take in fresh water, into regularize and take fresh water into the marsh, to rejuvenate the marsh. But what we fear would happen is that it shouldn't end up having clogged polythene, plastic and sewage and everything flowing into the marsh. So that will happen. But that only they are giving the second alternative of removing checkpoints, like on the parallel side of the water body where you're actually going to, this they're doing at Tambram and Avadi. On the parallel side of the water body, where you actually build an artificial system, where you actually hold, store, tank, and there are three different techniques. One is evaporation, and then removing sludge, and removing sludge cakes. You just remove the sludge cake, and then use it for landfill overlining and stuff like that. So that's being proposed, and that's actually being sent. So, and they are reviewing it. I think post-elections they will take a stand on that, but we don't know what they will do. I can hear you, sir.
Yeah, I come from all the way from Tirunelveli. So how to carry this forward to our Tirunelveli and other parts of Tamil Nadu and India?
So a couple of them here whom we've worked, to be very practical and realistic, Tirunelveli, the only thing is, if you tell us this is the thing, what we can tell us is you don't have to reinvent the wheel. We'll tell you, okay, these are the problems, this is the guy in PWD who you have to talk to clean up. This is the kind of thing we did. School programs, this is what we did. So we can actually give a wholesome mechanism to you and, like, work with you. All of us coming and working there, practically, I'm sure you understand it's not possible, but if there is a need, when there's urgent need, we all have to go, we'll go. But otherwise, if you want to, if you want to just replicate this there, more than happy, because this is not something which we patented. We're more than happy to tell you what all we did wrong and what all we did right and whom all we met, how we got volunteers, and I can actually put you on to all the people whom we are in touch with. I have no problem. So that bit I can do.
This is regarding the frogs what we were talking about. So these frogs, did you compare them with the other frogs found in surrounding areas in Chennai, Pondicherry and
So what we've done is we did a photo documentation of the amphibians. At that time, the same kind of frog at 9 different lakes, in almost 7 lakes it was one time. In just 2 lakes, which were 1.5 kilometers away from each other, the frogs were different. But the external morphology, the anatomy was same. Kind of the digits or like how the size that it grew and everything was the same across the 9. Only in these 2 lakes, it had a kind of a coloration difference.
I don't know if this is going to help or not, but I'm one of the wildlife students. So we've also been sort of looking at it, and so these animals show a lot of morphological variations, especially with respect to color. Of course, based on the prey, based on what they depend on, and as well as the different kind of environmental conditions. And these frogs are you considered?
I'm listening, Mama.
They're more sensitive, but it might have a significance. I mean, if you guys are trying to find out, it'd be
Yeah,
great if you
see,
guys
we don't know why it's so. About the prey thing, we definitely did look into it. When we looked at the topography is similar and the kind of flora fauna is not extremely different for it to have a varied kind of prey to feed on. So that's exactly why we were recommended this method where they asked us to find out. We tested water samples.
have you checked with some of the frog researchers?
Yes.
Have you checked with some of the frog researchers over here in India? Like there are
We did.
institutes in Bangalore and Chennai,
See,
Pondicherry, and
Professor Karandikar from the Lucknow University of Zoological Sciences, he is actually guiding us in this. He recommended this model. We didn't come up with this on our own. So he said, try doing this, we'll find out. So probably I'll take your email and I'll send you the photo.
yeah, I mean there are a lot of people we know who are working on frogs and all. I'm sure they can help you extremely good scientists.
Nice.
My name is Sanjana. You said that the rainfall is decreasing and we should preserve the marsh so that we have the level of water and the water table can be at a safe level. But why is the rainfall decreasing? Because you said that it will inject to the surrounding ground. But then the water in the marsh will also decrease, and if the water table does not fill at some point, then the water is just going to go to the surrounding ground and it will also decrease. So why is the rainfall decreasing?
You didn't understand what I said. I never said rainfall is decreasing. It is decreasing due to climate change and everything, but I have no knowledge to that extent. I said last 2 years we didn't have enough rains. The last 2 years we didn't have enough rains, and when we don't have enough rains, we don't have enough water to drink upon because there are so many of us, and every day so many new people are coming to the city, and the pressure that we're adding on the ground below to suck all the water is way too much. And it has to be, say, when you're drinking from something, you also need to feed. That eventually will happen, yes. See, also what will happen is you keep pouring into a bottle, it reaches its level, after that what happens? It only flows out. So that is the marsh where it gets stored, and then later it goes back in. So that's the whole logic behind this. So we need to have enough rains so that our marsh and groundwater has enough water.
Hi, I'm Nitin. I've got a small suggestion in fact. See, as you said, I'm really inspired by your speech, and I do understand that whatever you're doing is really great and I appreciate it. That's one part. Secondly, like, you know, you have got so many lakes. From 73 I've been in Velachery, I've seen so many lakes disappear. Like periodically, like these politicians, they fill in the entire place and new constructions come up. They sell the lakes in fact. That is one bad thing which has already happened. But now to revive the lakes or to save the lakes at least which are existent, why can't we take an initiative of speaking to some corporates who can, like, they can take over the lake and, like, you know, not only take over the lake, what happens is after a period of time they lose the interest. We can do one more thing, like we can have some fishes left in the pond and people can come and do some fishing, so that there will be a lot of people watching over the lake. You know, that is one thing which has been totally forgotten today. Children don't know about fishing because those days we used to do fishing and it's a really very interesting thing. And one more thing is there will be a lot of people coming and there will be eyes on the lake, they will be keeping a watch on it. So that way also, like, you know, we can safeguard the lakes. What do you think?
So about corporates, there are definitely genuine corporates who come forward to not just help us but other organizations also. For example, Ford as a company is trying to restore the Tirukachur lake, and there are other companies which have shown willingness, definitely there. And about the fishing angle of it, there's always a debate what is ethical, what is not, and that's exactly what I meant. We need to reintroduce species of varying kinds so that the water body remains fresh and active. But for us to go fish and remove it, I know it's controlled fishing, only a certain amount will be removed and everything, but we don't prescribe to that. But in return, as an alternative to that, we do nature walks, getting kids like her involved, understanding. For example, today she's asking a question, what will happen to water from the marsh, to getting her to actually research on it at a deeper level to understand the lake better, or clicking good photographs. These days everybody has a DSLR, some click good photographs of the lake, or shoot a small documentary film about the lake, or make a poem on the lake. So things like this is what we are trying to trigger into students and kids of a younger audience and get them involved. And the community around the lake, getting them to participate. So ours has always been a community conservation. We never walk into a neighborhood and tell them, see, listen, we know everything, you're wrong. We only go tell them, see, listen, please, we want to work with you, come join us. Out of 10, 2 people do. Slowly the 2 convert, and then they bring in more people. There's never been all the 10 people come. So that's exactly is the model, and that's exactly what we're trying also.
Hi.
This is the last question, please.
If you don't mind.
We'll share his mail ID and contact numbers
I
later.
have to go to the court, that's why please.
Yes, last question.
I am Prasanna.
Yes, sir.
What kind of plants do we plant nearby? I think there are some plants like vetiver which will take the toxins out of the land.
I have to mention this. Thanks, you asked a question. Let's grow our own oxygen, your group. They only help us plant and everything. So at the Arasan Karni Lake also, after we finished the restoration, they came with us and they planted. So we have actually done a proper study on the endemic species which actually survives in the given ecology in terms of the plants. So as you said, vetiver definitely, bamboo as a natural fencing, neem. So number one money that's exactly those plants are only being planted. Water purifying, and there's another criteria: berry bearing, nectar bearing, fruit bearing. So these act as feeder to the different dependent life forms, birds to insects to others. So berry bearing, nectar bearing, fruit bearing, purifying root varieties, that which can nourish the given soil pattern. So those kinds of plants are really big. I'm really sorry, please don't mind. Yes. We in that last one, create a new biodiversity.
And the second option is you have much of natural maybe it's got some insects or nothing more. If you go into places like Chennai, Kanchipuram and all these places,
Barren land.
it's relatively barren and otherwise you look very closely you will see the species. These places, have you ever considered creating a biodiversity if an opportunity is available to you, or is it
No,
beyond your...
it's not that we don't want to do it. Wherever we have enough volunteers to work with, and if, for example, hypothetically speaking, if you're suggesting that come listen, let's go to Chennai and do it, we're happy to sit and talk and work on it. That's
Okay, I will talk to you. We have a place in Kanchipuram where we can do something.
Okay, thank you so much, Arun, for inspiring us yet again. A big round of applause for this young man. Thank you. We hope to see you in the next Trek Polama as well. I request Nambi to give away the memento and the sapling to Arun. Thank you so much. A couple of announcements. Volunteers, I request everybody to register yourselves, whoever hasn't registered so far. The funds that are being collected here are used for the social initiatives conducted by the Chennai Trekking Club. We have our sponsors here: Wildcraft, Pro Bikers, Haricharan Homes, Aditya Agro, Trek and Ride, Be Sustain and Kanchi Eco Homes. We'll take a break for 10 minutes for the refreshments. We have some delicious nutritious millet cookies and some nannari, so you can just fuel yourselves for the next session. And those who want to donate blood can also go and donate blood. Let's not all go at one time, so 2 or 3 people can go at a time. Thank you so much. Meet you after